They say I'm a loser, a disgrace, an afterthought, but none of them have ever asked why I left. The wind was crisp that afternoon, slicing through Manhattan like an unspoken truth. Leaves danced across the sidewalk as I stood in front of the Blake mansion, its polished brass plaque glinting in the autumn sun. Everything looked the same. The marble lions flanking the door, the manicured hedges trimmed to perfection, the illusion of a flawless family frozen in time. Inside, preparations buzzed. Staff bustled with trays of hors d'oeuvres, floral arrangements were wheeled in by the dozen, and somewhere upstairs, Margaret Blake was probably shouting about the wrong shade of gold on the centerpieces. Of course, she wouldn't have wasted a real invitation on me. Not one with calligraphy and a wax seal like Chloe's or Brandon's. She merely told my cousin to let Lauren know, if she's around. No RSVP, no card, just a verbal afterthought. As if I weren't worth the paper. I wasn't supposed to come. And yet, here I was. You sure about this? Jenna asked, stepping out of the black car behind me. Her blonde curls framed her sharp face, eyes scanning me for hesitation. You don't owe them anything. I know, I said, smoothing the front of my coat. But I owe myself something. Jenna had helped me reserve a seat, one of the last tables available at Delgado's, the finest restaurant in the city. She'd used my real name, Lauren Elise Blake. Not a pseudonym, not an alias. That alone felt revolutionary. I remembered how my father used to look at me when I was little. Before the world told him that daughters were only worth the pride they brought to the family name. Back when he taught me how to ride a bike in Central Park, his booming laugh echoing through the trees. Now, I wasn't even worth an envelope. If you don't have anything to show off, Mom used to say, her fingers always adjusting some necklace or designer brooch, it's best not to show up. And yet, I showed up today. The irony? The venue wasn't just any upscale space. It was Blake Plaza. They thought it was a coincidence, but it wasn't. I'd signed the acquisition papers under a silent holding company. It had taken years of planning, calculated risks, and building quietly in the shadows. And still, I wasn't here to boast. I just wanted to watch. The dining hall shimmered with chandeliers and clinking champagne glasses. The Blake family took up the center table, framed by gold accents and applause. Brandon, the Wall Street prince, was already halfway into a speech about family values. Chloe, radiant in a custom gown, laughed at something her fiancé whispered. Probably a joke about who'd be disowned next. I stayed near the edges, unnoticed, a shadow among light. Lauren, Jenna nudged me subtly. Your table, front left. I walked slowly, every step echoing louder in my head than on the marble floor. My heart didn't pound. It pulsed with purpose. No one noticed me. No one flinched. Not even when I took the seat that bore my full name. But Margaret did glance my way when a server whispered something in her ear. Her brows furrowed, lips pursed. Then she turned back to her wine like nothing had happened. I sipped my water, watched, waited, and wondered. How long would it take before someone acknowledged I was here? If I get kicked off the table, at least I'll know who in the family really wants me there. I wasn't here to make a scene. Not yet. I was here to see who saw me. Not the girl they buried under guilt and perfection, but the woman who walked back in. Not to ask for a seat, but to watch them squirm when they realized it was her table all along. The expensive perfume in the air couldn't cover the fake smell. That was the first thing I noticed as I stepped into the glowing heart of Delgado's top floor, where laughter was practiced and smiles were strained. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above, casting golden light on sequined gowns and $1,000 suits. Every corner of the room screamed old money. Blake money. The restaurant staff moved like clockwork, gliding between tables. Waiters with pristine gloves. Musicians strumming smooth jazz in the background. Champagne bubbling in flutes like it had somewhere better to be. It was picture perfect, if you didn't look too closely. I did. Jenna had already peeled off to her own reserved seat discreetly, giving me space. Alone now, I adjusted the hem of my dark green dress. It wasn't borrowed, despite what they'd assume. It was custom-made, hand-stitched by a quiet designer no one here had heard of, but one who would soon be all over Fashion Week. My clutch felt heavier than it should have. Inside, nestled carefully, was a first-edition copy of The Old Man and the Sea. A worn corner, the same smell of paper my father used to carry on his fingers. He read it to me when I was 9, his voice softer then. Before success hardened everything. I took a slow breath and walked toward the main banquet hall. Eyes slid over me like I wasn't there. Mother was the first to really see me. She turned with a glass of wine in hand, her neck craning slightly before her lips curled into a brittle smile. Her gaze swept over my dress, down to my shoes, then up again. "Borrowed dress?" she asked, not hiding her disdain. "Or did you thrift shop your way back to us?" I held her gaze, then turned without replying. At the entrance to the grand hall, Chloe blocked my path. Her arms crossed over a bedazzled clutch, lips painted in a perfect sneer. Her fiancé stood beside her, silent but amused. "You're not on the list," she said sweetly, like a gatekeeper to some holy realm. "If you don't have anything to contribute, you should probably sit outside, or help in the kitchen." "I have a seat," I replied calmly. She smirked. "Where? On the sidewalk?" Brandon appeared, straightening his cufflinks like he'd rehearsed the moment. "Lauren," he said with mock warmth, "Delgado's doesn't do menus with prices. Just letting you know in case you were planning to budget." I didn't flinch. I turned and made my way to the small card with Lauren Elise Blake printed elegantly, though someone had clearly tried to move it to the edge of the room. I sat, composed, aware that more than one pair of eyes watched. Whispers rose and fell like waves in a stormy sea. The music never missed a beat. Then came the lean in. Margaret, ever the matriarch, tilted toward one of the suited men near the kitchen. Security, I guessed. Her wine glass barely moved, her lips barely parted. "She's not on the official guest list," she whispered just loud enough. "If necessary, invite her to wait in the lounge, politely." He nodded and disappeared. My heart didn't race. It held steady, trained from years of surviving dinners like this, before I'd learned how to disappear altogether. The room continued to sparkle. Laughter floated. Waiters poured. No one noticed the storm about to crack open. Then it happened. A gentle tap on my shoulder. Gloved. "Excuse me, ma'am," the man said quietly. "Would you mind stepping out to the lounge area? We're sorting a small issue with table assignments." I looked up. All eyes were on me now. Some curious, some smug, some already assuming I'd caused a scene. I stood slowly, not shaken, not angry, just ready. Because while they were busy arranging seats and status, they had no idea the name on the lease belonged to me. And the real party? Hadn't even started yet. "Who is she?" I heard it ripple through the crowd like static under silk. Whispers slithered across the room, gliding from table to table, clinking against champagne flutes. And this time, I didn't need to answer. The security guard still had one hand hovering near my shoulder, unsure whether to guide me toward the lounge or step back. His eyes shifted nervously. Something had changed in the air, and he felt it too. A woman in a sleek navy suit approached, tablet in hand, brows furrowed. Her name tag read, Sophia, the floor hostess. She looked from the guard to me, then glanced down at the screen Jenna must have manipulated with surgical precision. "Wait," she said, voice halting. "Reservation under Lauren Elise Blake?" I nodded calmly. She blinked. "Excuse me one moment." She spun on her heel and disappeared toward the bar. Moments later, a silver-haired man emerged from behind a side curtain, the kind of entrance reserved for people who didn't have to make entrances. Mr. Delgado, the owner himself. His steps were swift but measured. He didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight toward me. "Ms. Blake," he said, bowing slightly. I'm deeply sorry. There's been a terrible mistake. A pause. Then, louder with crisp authority, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO of LEB Group. She is, in fact, the host of tonight's gathering. Silence. And then, gasps, murmurs. The clink of a glass dropped too fast. Somewhere near the middle of the room, someone coughed and whispered, "That's her? From the startup gala in Milan?" Another voice chimed in, "The one who outbid Titan Corp last quarter?" I stood quietly, letting the recognition settle like dust in a still room. At the center table, Margaret's wine glass trembled slightly as she set it down. Chloe was frozen mid-laugh, her mouth open but void of sound. Brandon's smirk had dissolved into something unsure, then stiff. And Edward Blake had gone pale. Sophia returned to my side with a new tone in her posture. "Ms. Blake, your room upstairs is fully prepared. Would you like to proceed now?" I glanced at the security guard, still rooted in place. Then I smiled. "It's okay," I said gently, just loud enough. "If they don't invite me in..." I turned to the crowd, to the table where my family sat stiff as statues. "I'll invite them out." Gasps again. Someone at a nearby table chuckled nervously. The tension snapped like dry branches underfoot. Chloe stood abruptly. "This has to be a joke," she started, her voice shrill, but Mr. Delgado cut her off. "The VIP floor," he announced, "is reserved for the building owner. And that's Ms. Blake." He extended a hand, gesturing toward the private elevator at the far end. "Please," he said, "allow me to escort you." The golden doors shimmered, newly relevant, newly powerful. I turned once more, offering a polite nod to my stunned family. Then I walked, measured, steady, unbothered, toward the elevator. Not to make a statement. Not for revenge. Just to take my rightful place. And for the first time in years, every step felt like mine. Less than an hour ago, they kicked me off the table. Now they were pulling out a chair and offering it like a prize. The VIP floor shimmered with elegance, subtler than the showy banquet below. Soft music hummed from hidden speakers, and the lighting was warm enough to soothe, sharp enough to expose. Delgado's staff had moved the entire event upstairs within minutes, under new instructions. My instructions. Mr. Delgado himself greeted me at the entrance, flanked by the head chef and 2 managers. "Everything will be tailored to your preferences, Ms. Blake," he said, handing me a sleek menu printed just for the evening. "The kitchen is at your command." I thanked him politely, knowing full well the Blake family behind me was watching every word, every interaction, like it was some kind of performance. And maybe it was. The moment I sat down at the head of the table, the roles reversed. I wasn't the ghost in the corner anymore. I wasn't the embarrassing daughter, the overlooked sibling, the one sent to the kids' table year after year, even when I turned 17. Number I was Lauren Elise Blake, CEO of LEB Group, and now they couldn't unsee it. Margaret was the first to adjust. She leaned forward with a tight smile, her voice suddenly velvet. "Darling, why didn't you say something sooner? You've always had such potential." I knew it. My fingers rested on the polished table. "You did?" "Of course." She sipped her wine. "I've always believed in you. We just didn't want to pressure you." That was rich. I remembered the countless nights she'd told guests I was still figuring things out, her tone dripping with well-mannered pity. Chloe chimed in next, her voice just loud enough for nearby guests to catch. "Lauren and I have always been close." She beamed. "She's just more private, you know. But we talk all the time." I raised an eyebrow. "Do we?" She laughed. "Oh, you're so modest." Brandon, ever the opportunist, leaned in across the table, resting his chin on his hand like he was interviewing me for a magazine spread. "So, Lauren," he said smoothly, "is being a CEO tiring?" I didn't blink. It's better than living a life of formality. There was a brief silence, broken only by the discreet clink of silverware being reset by a server. Across the table, one of the important guests, someone from the mayor's advisory board, if I remembered right, smiled behind his wine glass. "You've built something quite impressive," he said. "They're saying LEB Group's valuation is nearing $1 billion. Chloe coughed delicately. Margaret fanned herself with a napkin. I smiled politely, ignoring the shift in posture across the table. Suddenly, everyone was leaning in, eager to be seen acknowledging me. A part of me drifted back to that childhood birthday party when I wasn't allowed to sit with the adults. Margaret had said, "You haven't earned your place here." I ate cake alone on the steps, watching Chloe brag about her horse riding ribbons while Brandon recited business terms he barely understood. And now? Now I sat at the head of the table not because of their approval, but because of the value I created. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rub it in. But I let the silence between my answers speak louder than any insult they'd ever thrown. Dessert arrived. A delicate soufflé with edible gold. Mr. Delgado himself placed it before me, bowed again, and said, "Only for the host." Chloe's eyes followed it like a hungry child at a bakery window. Then, quietly, my father, who hadn't said a word all evening, set down his fork. His gaze settled on me. No hostility, no sarcasm, just something unreadable. "We need to talk," he said, voice low but firm. "Privately." The room quieted again, just for a second. I met his eyes, and nodded once. My father once told me, "Keeping your word is a form of honor." But he was the first one to forget me. The balcony stretched wide and silent, wrapped around the top floor of Blake Plaza like a crown. Below, the city shimmered in fractured lights, streets humming with late-night life, windows flickering like tiny pulses in the dark. The skyline was everything my father loved, sharp, proud, unyielding. We stood at opposite ends of the glass railing for a long moment, saying nothing. Then, slowly he turned toward me. "I didn't know," he said. "I truly didn't know." I didn't answer. He took a breath, straightened his collar, and said it again, this time without the shield of pride. "I didn't know it was you. The articles, the acquisitions, the headlines. I saw the name Lauren E. Blake and thought it was a coincidence. Or maybe I didn't want to believe it." I leaned against the railing, the wind brushing past my hair. "Would it have mattered?" I asked quietly. "If you knew earlier?" He looked down, then shook his head slowly. "That's the part I don't have an answer for." I turned to face him. "You once told me that a person's worth is defined by what's inside. You told me that when you took me fishing. Remember? I was 9. You gave me that battered Hemingway book and said, 'This is how you know who someone is, by what they carry when no one's watching.'" His lips parted in surprise. He remembered. I could see it. "And yet," I continued, "you spent years looking through me, measuring me by what I hadn't achieved yet. Because I didn't become Chloe or Brandon or what you thought I should be." He blinked rapidly, eyes glistening. "You were always quiet. I thought you were lost." "Number I was building," I said. "Quiet doesn't mean invisible." The city wind carried our words outward, away from the room full of people who still didn't know how to talk without calculating. "I asked to speak," he said, "because I need to say something I've never said to you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away." He took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the streetlights below. I chased the image of a perfect family, of success, of legacy, of the kind of dynasty people talk about in magazines. And in doing that, I let the real version of my family disappear, starting with you. My chest tightened, not with pain, but with the unfamiliar ache of finally being seen. "You remember your heart attack 2 years ago?" I asked softly. He nodded. "The hospital bills were enormous. Brandon stepped in." "No, Brandon thinks he did." He turned sharply. "I paid them," I said. "Every cent. Quietly, through a blind trust. Jenna helped with the paperwork." His eyes searched mine. Why? Because I didn't do it for recognition, I said. I did it because somewhere in me, I still loved the man who used to take me fishing. A long silence. Then, slowly, his shoulders slumped. Not in defeat, but in surrender. In humility. Maybe, he whispered. It's time for me to learn how to be a father again. I nodded once. And I'm learning how to forgive again. He looked hopeful for a second. With conditions, I added, letting the edge return to my voice. He gave a hoarse laugh. Fair enough. We stood there like that, side by side, not fully healed, but no longer broken. When we returned to the dining room, I spotted my mother near the center, her voice as bright as crystal under the chandelier. She stood next to a man in a navy suit, the head of a major nonprofit in the city. And this is my daughter, she said, beaming for the whole room. My pride. The CEO of LEB Group. As if the past hour hadn't happened. As if she had always said that. I looked at her, then at the donor who smiled and reached out his hand. I shook it politely, but in my mind, I marked the moment. Because some performances, no matter how polished, couldn't rewrite what we all remembered. I used to stay silent to keep a little bit of affection left. But today, they broke all limits. The party was over. The guests had gone, the music had faded, and only the lingering scent of champagne and perfume remained in the air. In the quiet lounge adjacent to the VIP dining room, it was just us now. Lauren Blake, and the people who used to be my family. Margaret sat perfectly upright on the velvet armchair, her diamond bracelet glinting in the low light as if it, too, refused to dim. Chloe lounged across from her, arms folded, mouth set in a frown masquerading as indifference. Brandon paced near the bar, pouring himself a second glass of whiskey he didn't need. No staff, no audience, no stage. Just the truth between us. Margaret broke the silence first with a sigh that sounded rehearsed. I don't want tonight to end like this, she said softly. We're still a family. Misunderstandings happen, especially when children grow up and take different paths. You've always been special, Lauren. I see that now. I turned to her slowly. Do you remember when I won the state writing award? I asked. She blinked. Of course. Really? I asked calmly. Because when I came home with the medal, you were on the phone with Chloe asking if she found the Chanel bag you wanted in Paris. Her lips parted. No answer. You told me, that's sweet, dear, but writing doesn't pay the bills. Then you hung my award behind the laundry door. Silence again. Chloe let out a small scoff. You're making it sound worse than it was. I looked at her, unflinching. You once told me not to embarrass the family in front of Dad's guests. Then you had me removed from the party tonight, in front of the same guests. Chloe bristled. I didn't know who you were then. No, I replied. You just assumed I wasn't someone worth knowing. That's different. Brandon stepped in, voice lighter, trying to smooth the edges. Look, he said, lifting his glass. I didn't think you'd be this successful. I mean, you never talked about what you were doing. We thought you were just drifting. I met his eyes. You don't need to think. Just don't look down on me. His smirk faltered. I stood up. I'm not here to replay the past. I'm not interested in your apologies or your attempts to revise history. I just want clarity. Margaret leaned forward slightly. Lauren, I cut her off, gently but firmly. I don't need admiration. I've never needed it. But from now on, don't humiliate me. Don't call me when you need someone to parade in front of guests. Don't mention my name when you're showing off the family's achievements. I don't owe you that. Chloe's jaw clenched. So what? You're just cutting us off? Number, I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. The room stilled again. The weight of truth, finally spoken aloud, settled like dust. Right then, the lounge door opened. Jenna stepped in, elegant as ever, holding a slim file in her hand. Her presence, as always, shifted the energy instantly. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, walking directly to me. "The Blake Foundation proposal. Legal's done reviewing the documents." She handed me the file. I took it without hesitation. Margaret's brows lifted. "Blake Foundation?" Jenna turned to them with a polite smile. "Lauren's establishing a philanthropic initiative, independent, fully self-funded, focused on education and rebuilding urban communities. She's naming it after her grandfather, not the family." The silence cracked like glass. "I thought," I added calmly, "it was time the name meant something again." Margaret opened her mouth, but no words came. Brandon looked like he'd swallowed his whiskey the wrong way. Chloe shifted uncomfortably, unable to find a quip that would work in this room anymore. I turned to Jenna. "Let's go finalize it." As we walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't here to conquer them. I was just done shrinking around them. Behind me, my family sat frozen, trying to process a truth they never expected to face. I didn't need their validation to rise. I just needed them to stop dragging me down. Beneath the glittering walls of legacy and pretense, the one they cast aside rose not with vengeance, but with truth. She didn't need their approval, only the freedom to no longer be diminished. Justice didn't roar. It arrived in quiet defiance, shifting the balance not with fury, but with dignity earned and silence broken. Like the final note of a song long stifled, it rang clear at last. Sometimes it's not revenge we seek, but the right to be seen, to no longer explain ourselves in the face of cruelty. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. Like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Type 1 if you felt every moment of her journey.